Ginger. Perfect timing. Perfect timing. All right, welcome friends. Good morning. It's still morning, right? It is, yes. Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Lauren with Second Star to the Right in Denver, Colorado, and we are so excited today to bring you a very special event with very special guests from our local SCBWI chapter, the Rocky Mountain chapter. We have 4 amazing panelists today that I will introduce to you and let them introduce the book that they're celebrating. We all know 2020 has been a crazy year, to say the least. And a lot of things didn't get to happen that we wanted to happen. And one of those things is celebrating book releases. So all of our panelists today have had a book come out this year. We didn't get to celebrate in person. So we're here today to celebrate them, to celebrate their book, to celebrate SCBWI and everything that it encompasses. So please join me in welcoming our panelists today. We'll give an introduction and then they'll introduce their books and a little virtual round of applause. We have with us Lija Fisher, Nanci Turner Steveson, Claudia Mills, and Fleur Bradley. Nanci, do you want to kick it off and introduce your book to us?
Sure, why not? Why not? Hello, everybody, and thank you for being with us, and thank you to Second Star for doing this for us. This is my 3rd book that has come out with HarperCollins. It's titled Lizzie Flying Solo, and it's the story of a recently homeless girl who loves a pony that she cannot have. In a nutshell, that's what it is. And I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nanci. Claudia, do you want to introduce your book?
Okay, my book had 2 actually book babies that came out this year. It's a series called After School Superstars, which takes place in an after school program where every book and every month of the program is a different themed camp. So the series opens with Nixie Ness Cooking Star, which came out last year, where Nixie stars in a book about cooking camp. Her close friend Vera stars in the 2nd book, Vera Vance Comic Star, which is a comic book making camp. And then this fall saw the debut of Lucy Lopez Coding Star, where Lucy has the challenges of a computer coding camp. So that's my book.
Awesome, thank you, Claudia. Fleur, do you want to introduce your book?
Okay. I'm muted now. My latest book is my 4th book. It's called Midnight at the Barclay Hotel. Unfortunately, it's in reverse, but that can be kind of like a mystery you solve. It's a mystery for kids, a little bit spooky, set in Colorado at the Barclay Hotel that's kind of modeled after the Stanley Hotel. So if you're into mysteries, this is the book for you.
That's great.
Awesome. Thank you, Fleur. And very luckily, it's only reversed for you, but everything is facing the right way for the audience. So we can see all the beautiful titles that you have there. I love it. All right. And Lija, last but not least, do you want to introduce your book?
Hi, everybody. My name's Lija Fisher, and the paperback version of The Cryptid Keeper came out in August, and it is the sequel to The Cryptid Catcher. And this is a series about the search for cryptids, which are legendary animals that might be real, such as Bigfoot, who is behind me. And The Cryptid Keeper was a finalist for the Colorado Book Award in Juvenile Literature.
Wow, nice.
Awesome, thank you. Please, everyone, join me in a virtual round of applause for our panelists today and their books. Woo! We're so excited to celebrate. Okay, so we have some moderator questions coming from me that we will ask, and then if there's time at the end, we will have some audience Q&A. Just a reminder to drop your questions in the chat if you had them, and if we have time at the end, we will get to them. So our first question for our panel is, where did you get the idea for your book, and how did you bring that idea to life? Lija, go ahead and get us started.
Well, I wish I could say that I had some really literary inspiration, but my inspiration was Charlie Sheen. I read an article many years ago when Charlie Sheen, the actor, was in his, let's say, exuberant time period, and he put together a hunting party to go to Alaska to search for the otter man. And I read this article and I thought, who is the otter man and what does Charlie Sheen want with him? And so I researched the otter man and I discovered the world of cryptids. And I had never heard that word. And I thought, what are cryptids? And I discovered that cryptids are animals that have not yet been proven to exist through science, but yet people believe do exist. And there are hundreds, if not thousands of them around the world, from the chupacabra to the Loch Ness Monster to Bigfoot to the Yeti. And these are animals of legend. And I thought, when I was a kid, I was super into mythology, but as an adult or as a kid, I'd never heard about cryptids. And so then I went down the rabbit hole of researching all these different animals that supposedly might exist around the world. And then I just brought it to life in my books.
That's awesome. I love that, falling down a rabbit hole. That's like my favorite part, right?
Yeah, once I started researching like Bigfoot conventions, I discovered that there's like at least 20 Bigfoot conventions just in America. So it's a really fascinating, rich world that is huge out there.
That's so amazing. Thank you, Leah, for sharing that. Nanci, why don't you go ahead and let us know about where you got your idea and how you brought
Sure. I have been a horse girl my whole life since I was 3 years old. And so I've always been involved with horses, and I managed equestrian centers in Maryland for many, many years. And I watched lots and lots and lots of kids, mostly girls, fall in love with these ponies and really gain a lot of courage and self-esteem and things like that through that. But really, this book took me 13 years to write, but its origins were from when I was a child. And I had a friend, a very good friend, whose father very abruptly left the family. And it was very public. It was awful. And I was traumatized by it. And my friend Katie was very traumatized by it. And that sat with me for a long time about what happened to that family as a result of that father's decision. And I still think about it to this day. And then when I was managing horse farms and these kids would come and I would see this love for these horses, and I would think about the kids who don't have these kinds of opportunities. I was also very touched by several families that I knew who were raising kids living in transitional housing shelters or homeless shelters when the kids were in school, and their stories really moved me. So it was sort of an accumulation of those things that spilled out onto the page. But Robert Frost says, "A poem begins with a lump in the throat." And I carried this lump around with me and this sadness from my friend Katie for many, many, many years. And it spilled out into this book. And I'll let you know that Katie's doing great now. But it spilled out into this book. And it's a very real thing that happens that a lot of kids are not aware of, that their schoolmates are living in shelters. And of course there's ponies and there's, dogs and things like that. So
That's awesome. Thank you, Nanci. It's a great motivation, great inspiration. All right, Claudia, how about you?
Well, for decades, I wrote school stories. I love writing school stories because school stories allow the author to bring together a diverse group of kids who might never have come together if it hadn't been for the constraints of being in school, and also lets kids learn things. Lets the kids in the book learn, and then the readers can learn too. But I decided I needed to branch out, and that's why I created an after-school series, because I thought, well, you'd still get the same diverse group of kids, and they'd still be learning all kinds of cool things if you create the right kind of program, but you don't have any standardized tests or report cards or disgruntled parents. It would be ideal. So for each book, I tried to think of something that would be really fun for kids to learn, but it's something that's not part of the curriculum. So cooking and comics and coding. And then in each book, I also try to have some relationship that's going on in the character's life outside of the camp that's going to be influenced by what's going on within the camp. So Nixie's story is a friendship story. Her best friend doesn't get to come to the camp with her. Her best friend's going to another friend's house. Instead, will she lose her best friend? She has to bake her way back into her best friend's heart. And then Vera's story is a mother-daughter story, because Vera loves comics, but her mother doesn't approve of them. my mother did not approve of comics. My mother never let us have any comics or cartoons. And Vera's mother really, so Vera has to navigate her love for comics, and maybe she can write a comic that will make her mother see how much comics mean to her. Well, for Lucy's story, Lucy Lopez, Coding Star, it was the publisher who said, how about a coding camp? And I said, sure. And then I realized I know nothing about coding. I know nothing about computers. I'm terrible at computers, but you know, I'm a good sport. So I had to learn about computers, computer coding. And I sat in on some terrific classes taught by local teachers where I saw how thrilled the kids were to enter into this world of trying to make stuff happen on the computer screen. But I still had a lot of, but then I sat down to try to do it myself, and I couldn't. I just can't do stuff like that. So I knew I had to do something. So I hired an 11-year-old kid to sit with me as my coding tutor. And she sat with me and showed me how to code dance parties and how to animate the letters of my name and jump around on the screen. And it is a sister story. Lucy Lopez, A Coding Car, is a sister story. I was an older sister, and I tyrannized over my younger sister and resented any copying of anything I did. And decades ago, I wrote a book about an older sister named Cynthia and her younger sister, Lucy. And I was totally on the side of Cynthia. Well, my sister read that book decades ago, my younger sister, and said she was going to write her own book someday called Cynthia and Lucy, The Real Story. At Last It Can Be Told, where she would tell the younger sister's side. And so Lucy Lopez is, oh, it's Nixie. Lucy here. Lucy, poor Lucy, is a younger sister. And I named her after the Lucy from the earlier book. And this is where I allow myself finally to realize how awful I was as a big sister and how important it is for a little sister to get to come into her own. So that's
awesome. Thank you, Claudia. That's wonderful. And Fleur, how about you? What was your inspiration for your book?
I knew I really wanted to write a mystery for kids when I was growing up. I just loved to read. And I read my way through most of the library when I was about 11, 12 or so, most of the children's department. There was no YA department at the time. So there was a librarian that said, well, why don't you try Agatha Christie? And I just absolutely fell in love with the genre, have been ever since. And what I really wanted to do is create that introduction for kids to the mystery genre and show how a mystery might be solved. So I started with an actual murder mystery. It happens off scene. Mr. Barkley has died. And in his will, he has invited several guests who he thinks are suspects in his murder to the hotel. The tag-alongs are kids. That's JJ, Emma, and Penny. They're there to solve the mystery. So I had my mystery inspiration. I had my characters somewhat figured out at the time, and I visited the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park and did the ghost hunting tour. I had a lot of fun. And I thought, this is a cool setting for the mystery. So it was that recipe of traditional mystery, spooky setting that kind of set off Midnight at the Barkley Hotel. So it's a fun introduction to mystery with a little bit of spooky in.
Awesome. Thank you, Fleur. And so this panel is middle reader novels. And in middle reader novels, this is kind of the first time that kids are getting books that don't necessarily have pictures or illustrations throughout. And I know sometimes there are little things drawn in or, you know, at like the head of the chapter or something, but it's not like a picture book where it's mainly visual when you have just fewer words. You have mostly words for the first time for these kiddos. So our next question is, what devices or techniques did you use in your storytelling to help paint a picture for these young readers, since there aren't always illustrations to help them figure out the story? And Fleur, we'll actually start with you for this one.
So something I try to do as much as possible is write books that appeal to reluctant readers. It's kind of my little soapbox to try to get kids to read, to keep kids reading, and to keep them reading into adulthood, because it's so important for reasons I could go on for an hour to talk about. But basically, it's really important to get right to the point. So one of the techniques I use a lot is just a rule of three. So if I'm coming into a space, I try to look at it as a 12-year-old, and I try to find three things I would notice. So if I'm walking into a space as an adult, I might notice the beautiful woodwork in the Stanley Hotel. If you're 12, you're not going to look at the beautiful woodwork. You're going to look at, oh, how awesome is it going to be to explore this hotel? Oh, look at that dark corner and, you know, awesome fireplace and hot chocolate to be had. You look at things differently when you're 12. So it's that, and I think that I probably speak for everyone here, it's that ability to look at something through the eyes of the children that you're writing for.
Oh, wonderful. Such a great idea. Thank you. And Claudia, you are next. What techniques do you use?
Well, my series is actually sort of a very much younger middle grade or sort of older chapter book. So I'm lucky I do have some illustrations. But I have to say that the visual has never been that important to me as a writer. And I think I'm just not a visual person. Like I would walk into the Stanley Hotel, the Barclay Hotel, I wouldn't really notice anything except maybe the people and how they're interacting with each other and my feelings and the social dynamics of the group that I'm in. So I'm more about like the interior world of children than really about the external world. And because I write about school or after school, kids already kind of know the setting, that they sort of know what a classroom looks like. And my classrooms in my books don't look any different from anybody else's classrooms. But it's the kids and their interactions that, for me, move the story forward. And there, I think I just rely a lot on dialogue and interior monologue. I try to remember very hard what I thought as a kid at different moments, and I start to just hear the characters in my head talking to each other, just the kind of things that they would say. And so I think it's the dialogue and the characters' honestly revealed feelings that move my story forward without as much attention to the visual.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. Thank you. Great answer, Claudia. All right, Nanci, you are up next. What technique do you use?
Well, first I want to thank Fleur for her answer, because that's brilliant, and it's great to hear somebody else say something concrete like that, which I probably don't have something quite as concrete, because I have a tendency, I always have to do a lot of cutting of descriptions, because I'm a very sort of descriptive writer. And what I have to do is sort of the same thing as what I've written is I have to take it and I've got to not be married to it, cut a bunch of it, get rid of it. And there's those moments when you're working through something like this where you really have to make a decision, which of these things are really important and which of the things are going to resonate with a child. And I use a lot of these kinds of things either to like slow a pace or speed up a pace, or to mirror a mood, a changing mood of a and not, hopefully not in a super cliche way, like, an opening of a book where there's a big storm and then, it's all this drama. Not so much like that, but more subtle. And I have an absolutely fabulous editor who loves my literary writing, but also is really good at what he does. And so he's really helped me learn how to make decisions on which of these things must stay and which of these things must go. And so I have to bow to him and give him a lot of credit for walking me through that and helping me learn that kind of thing. And also having beta readers who are kids. I have parts in every one of my books that, there are probably kids who just like flip right through them, but adults and librarians like linger over. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Nanci. All right, and Leah, how about you? What do you use?
Yeah, so for my book, I had a unique challenge because I had to describe these animals that might exist, but we don't have many, if any, photos, of them, except for the Loch Ness Monster and the Patterson Gimlin movie, of the one of Bigfoot walking. And so at first I thought that I could just create whatever I wanted with these animals. I thought, oh, well, they might not exist, so I can just describe them in any way that I want. But that was until I got introduced to Lauren Coleman, who is the founder of the International Cryptozoology Museum. And he's been studying cryptids. He's a cryptozoologist, and he's been in the field for like 40 years. And he taught me that actually I can't just describe the creatures any way I want, that there are actual first-person sightings of most of these cryptids. And so I could just go and research the sightings that people have of these animals, and I could use then what they saw and then create my own description that I thought would be really appropriate for 8 to 12-year-olds. And so that was really fun to have this descriptive research of animals that we haven't found yet. And then I also use, like Nanci said, some beta readers. I sent my book first to a friend of mine whose kids live in California near the beach. And I realized they've never been to the Rocky Mountains. And my book takes place in the Rocky Mountains. And so I would just kind of describe the mountains, taking it for granted, like, okay, now we're in a meadow in the mountains. And they were like, we don't know what that is. Like, what do you mean, a meadow in the mountains? So I realized that I had to get a little more detailed with flowers, grass, trees. And so hearing what kind of deeper layers of descriptions kids need helped me to formulate better descriptions.
That's so wonderful. Thank you, Leah. What a great answer. All right, our next question. What is the most difficult part about writing for this age group? Because they're not yet adult, they can't really handle too mature of content, but they're still looking for some depth, something more than a picture book. So for you, as the author, what was the most difficult part about crafting a story like that? And Claudia, we'll start with you for this one.
Okay, well, I actually drew up this very famous line from Madeleine L'Engle. She says, you have to write the book that wants to be written, and if the book will be too difficult for grown-ups, then you write it for children. So I think that children are kind of naturally drawn to depth. It's more adults who don't have time anymore for philosophical explorations. I taught philosophy for many years, and I used to say that philosophers are the people who still ask the questions that the other grown-ups have stopped asking. So anyway, I think kids are drawn to depth. So it's more that I think just to follow the way children are just trying so hard to figure out how the world works. And I'm particularly interested in like how the world works in a way ethically. I like to write about kids who have some hard choices to make. I don't want to write about, how you shouldn't lie and you shouldn't cheat and you should steal, you should be good. But I want to write where sometimes there's just difficult issues that kids are wrestling with about how best to navigate a friendship like Nixie, or how best to be who you want to be whilst worrying that you may disappoint your mother, as Vera does in the comic book. Or Lucy, like, if coding is my sister's thing, can it still be my thing? Or if she's claimed it, do I have to find a different thing to be my thing? Can more than one person have the same kind of passion there's a big marker for who they are? I think kids are just naturally drawn to these questions, and I am. And so I sort of just let my child characters drag me along to try to find not a be-all, end-all answer, but a tentative, provisional, for this book answer.
That's such a great answer, Claudia. Thank you so much. All right, Nanci, how about you? What was the most difficult part for you?
Well, thanks for having me come right after that brilliant answer. First of all, one of the things that I had to really learn how to do, because I specifically wanted to write for middle grade kids for a couple of reasons, but I had to learn to write what they wanted to read, not what I wanted to write. And there's a big difference. And I can still write the story that I want to write, but I need to write it for these kids in the way that they want to read it. But I also really feel like, kids learn so much through the pages of a book. And one of the reasons that I wanted to write for middle grade kids is because we have an opportunity. It's sort of where you make or break a reader often. And we all know that adults who read have more empathy and, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that opportunity. but it also often, it's the first introduction that they have to some sensitive topics. And all of my books, you'll find reviews that say that that these are topics that kids shouldn't be hearing about, which I just think is garbage. But so the hardest thing really is to make it so that it's a great, like, the kids want to read this book for all these reasons, but at the same time they're being exposed to worlds that maybe they are not being exposed to in their town or in their school or in their home or in their culture. And it not only helps them develop empathy, but for a lot of kids, it makes them feel okay. Like, I'm okay. I'm not the only one going through this, and look, this is me right here inside this book. Or, oh, this is what my friend is going through. Now I understand, so there's a really important moment that you have to make decisions about how you offer these things to kids so that they want to read them and that they understand. So that's one of the biggest challenges, I think.
Awesome. Thank you, Nanci. That's a great answer too. I love hearing all the different challenges. Makes me feel better, like you're talking about. All right, Fleur, you are up next. What was the biggest challenge for you, the most difficult part?
Well, so part of the reason I wrote Midnight at the Barclay Hotel is I'd written 3 books before this series, more of a spy kid sort of thing. And I had met a librarian who reads tons of middle grade and really loved my first books. And I met her at the convention, and she said, the kids really want a murder mystery. So, and at the time, it really wasn't, it wasn't something that was deemed okay within, and a lot of the time we're dealing with more the publishing side, like what are they ready to publish for kids rather than what are the kids ready for. There's a lot of hurdles in between. So I knew I had to write something that isn't scary, off-putting, something that's can show, hey, people die sometimes, and awful things happen, but here's how we can make sure that justice prevails, that whoever is doing, the murderer, that those people can be caught. And in the book, I used there's a detective character in there, Penny's grandpa, and he kind of shows them a little bit how an investigation is done. So it's wrapping that in a package, so to speak, that is not too scary for younger kids that might be reading the book. At the same time, you have to have, like Nanci said, or like Claudia said in the quote, you have to have a clarity that is often lacking in books that are written for adults. So it takes a great amount of skill to find that balancing act and to make the book accessible and interesting enough for kids to read, but also make sure that those difficult topics are handled in a way that they can understand. Because if you make it too complicated, or if you add some moral ambiguity that maybe they're not ready for, you want to be mindful of your reader, and there is a responsibility in what you present, I think. But it is a lot of the time overcoming all the people who are concerned also for kids and what they're reading, and making sure that it's something that they feel okay giving to a child. But particularly for me, it's the murder mystery, it's the crime component that I always have to kind of be very careful and mindful about, that I introduce that in the right way. And it's fun at the same time, because I know that if I can get kids to keep reading, and if I can get them to read mysteries, they'll a lot of the time continue reading. And as Nanci was saying, it's so important at this particular age, that 8 to 12 age is where we lose our readers. So if we can keep them reading, that's just the best.
Yes, that's so true. What a great answer. All right, Leah, you are up next. What was your challenge?
Yeah, I would say that this is one of my biggest challenges. Finding, I call it the heart of the book, because I write, as Fleur says, I agree with Fleur that I as well like to reach reluctant readers through writing fun adventure novels. And it took me a while to realize that even in a fun, zany adventure novel, there needs to be some heart to it. There needs to be a theme. And when I first started writing adventure novels, I was like, there's a sword fight and a fire breathing dragon, and that's all you need. And it was like, no, you need a little bit more. And when I started asking kids and adults, like, what did you like about this book? What did you like about that book? They never mentioned the magic or the swords or the castles. They mentioned the relationships, or they mentioned the struggles that the characters went through. And I was like, huh? But what about the magic? And it was like, no, like there was deeper stuff that gripped the reader. And so the technique that I had to learn to get the heart in my book is, somebody one time told me, they said, remember, Leah, there's what the character wants and there's what the character needs. So on an adventure, what the character wants is to find the buried treasure. But what the character might need on the inside is to learn that they can be a good friend. And so as they go on this adventure to find what they want, the treasure, they learn along the way that internally they can be a good friend. And that has made all the difference in my writing, the want and the need. It drives me nuts because I just want to talk about magic and dragons. But then I'm like, no, you got to get the heart in there. And so that little technique helped me with that.
That's such a great answer. And that's why I think I work for a children's bookstore, because all I want to do is talk about magic and dragons. And so I found a job that let me do that, like this. Great answer, Leah. Thank you so much. All right, our next question. Do you have a writing process? And if so, what is your favorite part of that writing process? And we are going to reverse order. So Leah, we will start with you.
Yes, my writing process is left to my own devices. I get up as early as possible because my belief is that then my brain is still kind of in that dream state from sleep. And I'm a very early morning person. So I like to wake up early, kind of be in that dream state. I make some coffee, I put on some music, and I just let her rip. I'm a pantser. You know, they say that some writers, you're either a plotter where you plot everything out, or you're a pantser where you just write by the seat of your pants and see what happens. And I definitely write by the seat of my pants. So when I'm writing, it's almost like I'm watching a movie happening in my mind as it happens. I have no idea where the story's going. I just let it flow from kind of this early morning dream state. And it's just wonderful. It's just so fun. I think if I plotted the book out ahead of time, it would spoil it for me. And so I just enjoy seeing where the story goes.
Very good. Very great answer. Thank you so much, Leah. Fleur, how about you? Do you have a writing process? And if so, what is your favorite part?
Oh, like Leah, once I start writing, I get up early and I write in the morning before the day gets away from me. But my favorite part, I think, is research, which is a problem because once I start looking for stuff, it's kind of like digging for gold, just to put it into perspective. So if I'm researching, say, a certain location, like I was researching the Stanley Hotel for some ghost stories, you can really get down to rabbit hole of, oh, this is cool, this is cool, this is cool. And then I have to go, okay, what part can I actually use? And it's usually maybe 1% of what I actually find. But that's one of my favorite parts of research because it's kind of like hunting for stories, all those little bits. Sometimes I'll find a story somewhere, I'll go to a museum or I'll watch a TV show and something interesting will come along and I'll write it down because it's like a little nugget that I can use maybe in the next book. And that's kind of my favorite part of writing.
I'm definitely with you on that. I love that part too. Nanci, how about you? Do you have a writing process and what's your favorite part?
Well, my process has changed drastically with the book I'm working on right now, and I really hope that this is the hardest book I'll ever write because it's really hard. I'm writing a book that's told through the point of view of a dog, and it is not easy. But it's and so you really have to nail it. But anyway, so this book I'm writing in a completely different way. I am also a pantser, but this book is a little bit different. But one of the things that I will say is that I'm not a person that says, okay, I'm going to write this many words every day, or I'm going to write this many pages, or I'm going to write for 7 minutes or whatever it is. I can't do that. So one time when I was working on Swing Sideways, and I was doing a big revision on Swing Sideways, which was my first book, I was living in Maryland. I went up to Vermont for 6 weeks, stayed in this cabin, just me and my dog, and I wrote and or edited or book mapped for 12 hours a day, literally, for 13 days straight. The only time I went out is to take the dog out. And then I like collapsed on this sofa and I watched all the episodes of Breaking Bad. I watched the John Adams HBO series. And for some reason, there was this basket of apples there. I ate all these apples, did that for 3 days. And then I got up and I did like another 3 or 4 days. It's the only time I've been able to do that. But because I'm not, because I have a job and things like that. So I can't just, do just that. But my favorite part is the part when I'm so excited. I'm old, so I was taught to type on one of those typewriters that has the long, the long pole things, whatever they were called. So I type like this. I type really loud. And so I'm always kind of like catching these keys of my laptop that are flying off of the computer, off of the laptop. And that's when I know that I'm really getting the stuff out. But the other thing is, and I imagine you guys have experienced this as well, like I'll be at work or I'll be somewhere and I can't wait to get home to get back to that book. You know how we have that book that we love to read? And then when you realize it's the book that you're writing, that's gold. When you have that feeling and you can't wait to get back to it, that's gold. And that's what I really love. Really love. It's a great question.
That's so wonderful. Great answer, Nanci. I love that. And Claudia, how about you? What is your favorite part of the writing process?
Well, I could never in a million years do what Nanci just described in those 12-hour days. I have a system that I've used always. I write for an hour a day, and I have an hourglass, and I turn it over, and it defines my hour. I call it my hour of bliss. And I just love writing just for an hour. For most of my life, I had another full-time job, but for the last couple of years, I haven't. And I thought, oh, maybe I'd write 2 hours a day, but I can't. I only can write for 1 hour. And then the other 23 hours, what I've written settles, and I guess my subconscious is working on it. But because I try to do it every day faithfully, I never get that far away from my work. And it's always, like a lover's rendezvous to be back for that hour again. And I love rituals. I always drink Swiss Miss hot chocolate. I write by hand. I always use the same pad and kind of paper and kind of pen and clipboard. And so I just love that. And I think in terms of a lot of authors say they love revision best, and certainly revision is wonderful, but there's something for me about the very beginning when it's all promise and it's all possibility. And I have one more little ritual that I love. When I write the first page of a new book, I go someplace special. I might go to a friend's house, or I might go to the Denver Botanic Gardens, or I might go to a cafe. And I love to go someplace special to sort of honor the specialness of starting. And that first page may not be the first page of the final book, but it's the first page that gets me started. And it's the page where I truly believe that anything's possible for this story. This will be the book, And so that's my process. And I swear by the hourglass. If there was a fire in my house, of course I'd have to save the dog and the people, but then I'd save my hourglass. Because I don't like a lot of hourglasses. I like my hourglass.
I love that.
That's so great, Claudia. Thank you. All right, panelists, our last question today. Do you have a favorite character? Doesn't have to be the main character, or a character who is either most like you or maybe most like who you want to be? And Fleur, I will start with you for this one.
I'm going to be bad and pick 2. I really like Penny in the book. She's a huge reader, so she's a lot like me, and it was kind of fun to model a character a lot like me. And her grandpa I like too. He's kind of a grumpy man who's a retired detective and really doesn't, he was invited to solve the murder, but he really just doesn't want to do it, and all he wants to do is spend time in the hot tub. So those are my 2 favorite characters. They were fun to write and a little bit of humor to it. So yeah, those are my favorites.
Awesome. Thank you. Claudia, how about you? And you can choose from any of your books or each of them.
Well, I think I'm the oldest person here, and I think I've been doing this the longest. I have 60 books now, written over 40 years. And so I have so many. I have so many characters. And my husband doesn't read my books anymore, but he used to read them, and he'd say, you write about all these different character girls, but they're all you. And it's true that like each character is a little different part of me. Because sometimes I'm exuberant and outgoing like I am, like on a panel when you're talking, but sometimes I'm painfully shy, and it's all I can do to like go into a gathering, and where you're supposed to try to talk to fancy people, I just want to find like a friend and go hide in a corner. So like, we're all different kinds of people. And so I kind of like that part of writing, is getting to develop all the different sides of myself. Or in Lucy Lopez Coding Star, it was fun. I mean, Elena, the older sister, who's not very nice in the book, is the sister I was, but to try out the younger sister's perspective and get to sort of play with that. So, and I guess the final thing I'll say, because I like to write series. One thing I like about writing series, I always have a different viewpoint character in each, not always, but I often have a different viewpoint character in each book from the same group of friends. And I love getting inside the head of not the main character and having that character get a turn to be the star. I think that's particularly satisfying, and it brings home the idea that, you know, everybody has a story. And if you just look inside them to find what that story is.
That's wonderful. What a great answer, Claudia. Thank you. All right, Leah, how about you? Do you have a favorite?
I often model my sidekick characters after movie characters who I really like. If there's a movie character that really sticks in my head, I'll just kind of think about their qualities and then expand them to make a fun middle grade adventure character. And in my books, probably Douglas Chancery, the old curmudgeon who sends the main character out on his journeys. I just love him. And because he's just a curmudgeon. And I modeled him after Lloyd Bridges in the movie Joe versus the Volcano, which Robert Ebert said is one of the top 5 underrated movies of all time. It's fabulous. And this character walks into someone's apartment with his cane, and he's like, it's dingy and shabby in here. And he puts his cane through the wall. And I just thought, what a fabulous character. And so when I was creating Douglas Chancery, I just pictured the kind of person who would walk into someone's home, look around, and just stick their cane through the wall because they thought it was so just a dingy place. And I just took it from there.
That's awesome, and such a great way to like bring in some of your favorite characters and expand upon it. I love it. And last but not least, Nanci, what about you? Favorite character?
Well, that's really hard. And I'll tell you something kind of funny. My first 3 books, the main character is a girl who is an only child. And I was raised in a family of 6 kids. And I think there's some sort of psychological work that's got to be done there on me, because I don't like, there's something there. There's some reason that they are single children. Anyway, there's a family in Georgia Rules, my second book, that rose up from something that a little girl said to me once, and she actually has a place in the book. And when I think about like that's the book that I want to go back and be with those characters. Like I want to go to Vermont, and I want to be in that store, and I want to be on the sleigh, and I want to be in that living room, and I want to be with that family and those kids, and I want to be in that barn and that maple, the maple grove and all those things with people. But as far as my most recent book, the character who is the pony in this book was modeled after a very beloved pony of mine, named Tugboat. Tugboat was the real pony. He has now passed away. And he was such a rascal. And so is Fire, who is the pony in this book. So, there's also, like in Swing Sideways, California. I loved California, loved her. And she was just wild and free-spirited and determined and bold and all the things that I wasn't when I was a kid. And then in Georgia Rules, Mama is like, she's kind of crazy. And she makes me laugh all the time, even though people hate her at first. So it's kind of hard to pin it down. Sorry, that's like a really long answer, but it's hard to pin it down because there's so much a part of us, right? They're so much a part of us. And that's why when we can get together on things like this and we can say those kinds of things, it's so refreshing. Because have you guys ever been like to a cocktail party or something and you tried to talk about your characters and everybody like stops and looks at you like, oh yeah, okay. So anyway, so that's a very long answer for that, but there you have it.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Nanci. And thank you to all of our panelists for being here today. We do have just enough time for our very special little secret surprise. We are going to take a moment to sing happy birthday to the books to celebrate their release. So I have a little treat here with our Second Star themed candles. I'm going to light right now. Panelists, if you have your treat, no worries if you don't, but if you do, you can get them ready now. Audience members, please feel free to unmute at this time and sing along with us. We're gonna sing Happy Birthday, Dear Books on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, books. Happy birthday to you.
How about another virtual round of applause for all of our panelists for their amazing books. Thank you so much to SCBWI, to Rondi specifically for helping us arrange this event, the Rocky Mountain chapter. We love you and appreciate you so much. Thank you to all of our panelists for being here, for sharing your stories with us, for working with us. We love you and we appreciate you too. Again, if you didn't get a chance to get any of the books on this panel or any of our panels today, Ava has shared that link in the chat. You can click on it there. You can call the store. If you did already order, the store will be in touch with you to either let you know when to pick up your book or when it has been shipped, depending on which option you chose. Thank you everyone for taking the time to be here and celebrate with us today. We appreciate you so much for supporting our community. I hope you all have a wonderful day and happy book birthday to all of the books.
Thank you.